Everybody have a good week?
Yeah.
Amen. Let's be honest. Anybody have some struggles this week? Yeah. Come on, why we got to go to church and be all phony and act like everything's perfect in our life? It isn't. We all have ups. We all have downs. Things go sideways. You know, I believe in that whole philosophy of real people ministering to real people. And when we come through the church doors and we try to make it like it's something that it isn't, we're doing a disservice to our congregation. We're doing a disservice to God's people, because there are times where we all struggle. We've been talking the last couple of weeks, I talked about through the VBS and everything, about evangelism, about the church getting excited about evangelizing. That's one of the two components, discipleship and evangelism, you know, that we're called to. This week I'm going to shift gears a little bit, maybe a lot, depending on how you look at it, and talk about the harvest of our habits. Now, that's a nice, catchy title. The harvest of our habits. Ooh, that sounds good. But really, it boils down to something very simple. A biblical truth, a process that we all live in and go through. It's something that is basically, it's a spiritual law. Now, the way we would say it in terms of the Bible is reaping and sowing. All of us are here in the midst of doing life because of choices we've made in life. Because we're going to see, I'm going to do it between this week and next week, but we're going to see that it's through those habits, it's through those choices, it's through those things we do that we sow, that we reap from. It's been all the way back through Genesis. This is something that God established as a law, as a rule, from the very beginning. And I'll show you that. But all of us, we make choices every day. And sometimes what we don't realize is that because we don't think about reaping and sowing. How many of you last week walked around and you're going, oh, I'm reaping and sowing today? Nobody did. But it is a principle that God laid out that we all live by. You cannot and you will not get around it. Won't happen. The world would say, I thought of a couple terms of how the world may say it. What goes around comes around. Right? Everybody heard that one? Or you made your bed, now you got to lay in it. Everybody heard that one? It's reaping and sowing. Sowing and reaping. It's what the whole principle is about. It's what it's all based upon. And there's those things in life that God, let me get this going, that God has made up concerning those spiritual things and those spiritual laws as we grow. And there's no more important law, or, well, I don't know if I should say it that way, but one of the very important laws that we always deal with, because it's destructive, but yet it also can be a blessing, but that is the reaping and sowing in life and what comes of it. The anchor scriptures that I'm going to use for this week and next week is in Galatians. Now, Paul, in the first 5 chapters of Paul, he's establishing to the Galatian church that the Christ followers, that they're no longer under this law that they have been of works, and he's introduced grace and just the different things, and those first 5 chapters are dealing with that, and they're no longer under that legal system. He's trying to show them and establish that. And then he picks up here in 6, and he tells them, we're going to go Galatians 6, 7 through 10. He says, now, don't be misled. You cannot not mock the justice of God. Now realize, he's just been convincing them that, hey, you're not in the legal system anymore. This isn't about legalism. This isn't about following, being under the law. But what I am telling you is don't mock God and His justice, because that does not cease to exist. There is still consequences to our sin. There's still consequences to the way we do life. There are still consequences and harvest to our habits, reaping and sowing. He says, you cannot mock the justice of God. You will always harvest what you plant. Remember I said you can't avoid this. You can't get around it. There's going to be a harvest of what you sow in life. This takes on many. Now, a lot of preachers, they minister, and nothing in mind really. There's one point next week, but really deals with the angle of a lot of people use the reaping and sowing. How can I say it? Your prosperity preachers use the reaping and sowing as give abundances of money and God will just give you back even more. I hate to tell you this, but there's a lot of people broke because of that. A lot of people have been given a disservice, haven't been ministered to correctly because they've been ministered to. Remember I talked about many and most of your mainstream churches, they preach emotion. And who in the right mind doesn't like to get things? Right? Everybody does. So it gets twisted up into this thing of it's about, hey, you give more. Now, I'm not saying God doesn't bless you through your giving. Don't get me wrong. But it's when it's done in a way to where it's a whole big financial thing of, oh, okay, well, I'm going to do this so God gives me even more money back. You see, because then we're asking amiss and then we're giving amiss. So this whole thing that I'm doing between this week and next week isn't centered around that. For the most part, it really doesn't have anything to do with that. But he's saying this, what I'm talking about is life. And we harvest from what we planted. He just told us that in Scripture. And this is New Testament Scripture. This isn't Old Testament. He's talking to Christian people. He's talking to believers. He says, those who live only to satisfy their own sinful nature will harvest decay and death from the sinful nature. But those who live to please the Spirit, that's how you know who he's talking to, will harvest everlasting life from the Spirit. You see, we have to, as Christians, we have this decay in us that is called flesh. And it loves the world. And it loves everything about the world. It loves everything that the world makes it feel good with. Some things are okay, but some things lead you down a path that takes you away from God. But he's saying that when that mindset changes and you become more in tune and connected with God spiritually, then things begin to change in your life and you reap those benefits and those rewards that are heavenly, that aren't temporal, right, but are eternal. And he's talking about those that just live to please their flesh. All that's in that is decay. Have you ever known anybody that's just, they're always trying to work that angle? They're doing every next get-rich-quick scheme on the internet. You know, they do this and they do that, and they're trying because they're trying to attain the world. But yet all they ever find themselves up in is in chaos and ruin. Their lives sideways. Now that doesn't mean for the believer that things don't go sideways. Don't take that, don't think that we have this magical pill or this little sprinkly fairy dust that makes us be void of having to deal with any consequences or anything in life. Because we're affected on many levels, and it isn't always by our doing, it can be doing the doings of others. He says in 6:9, he says, so let's get tired. Let's get tired. I should have made my font a little bigger. So let's get tired of doing what is good. So let's not. Okay. Boy, having a rough time there. Somebody's paying attention. I know that's a lot bigger up there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's not get tired of doing what is good. At just the right time, we will reap a harvest of blessing if we don't give up. How many of us have given up on God before? Hey, I'm putting my hand up.
Everybody.
And what I mean by give up, I don't mean that you necessarily go, oh, I don't believe in God anymore. No, but what I mean is no, I tried that church thing, but I'm just going to go do the world thing. So you don't equate that to giving up on God, but in all actuality you are. You're turning away from God to try to attain those things that are of the world, that he says bring decay. We've all done it. He's saying don't give up. He says, therefore, whenever we have the opportunity, we should do good to everyone, especially to those in the family of faith. So each of us, we have to continually to strive through those. We're not saved by our good works, but he's telling us that those works mean something. You know, those works that we do does establish that we are faith-believing individuals that are pouring out the Jesus in us into others. That's fruit. We are judged and we're seen by our fruit. The first thing that I want to point out, actually over the course of the next 2 weeks, there's 6 things. So I'm going to do 3 this week and 3 next week. But one of these laws that are intertwined with this reaping and sowing, or this whole thing of the harvest of our habits, just another way to look at it, just another way to say it, is that we reap a lot of things in life that we forget about, that from a positive side, both positive and negative, but from a positive side, that we had nothing to do with.
Yeah.
That we didn't sow. A lot that was planted by somebody else or even by God. That we didn't sow, but we reap the rewards in a positive way of that. So we're going to look at that. In Matthew 5:45, he says, he maketh his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and the unjust. He's saying, just because you're a Christian, don't think it's going to be an easy road.
Yeah.
God says, I'm a fair and I'm a just God. It rains on good people and it rains on bad people. I mean, I don't think anybody here has ever been walking outside of a building and, you know, okay, here's a rain cloud and it's pouring down rain over the bad person, the one that isn't with God. And then over here, the sun's shining on the one that's walking down the path that is with God. Anybody ever seen that? No, me neither. Because it doesn't work that way. But God has planted and he's done so many things in our life. What's God's beef with man? Let me give you a little bit here. Romans 1:25, he says, they trade. Now, I would encourage you to read all there in Romans 1. Man, it's some powerful stuff. But Romans 1:25, it says, they traded the truth about God for a lie. So they worship and serve the things God created instead of the Creator himself, who is worthy of eternal praise. See, humanity has begun, and from the beginning of time, began once the fall happens, we worship the creation. We worship what God has created, what God has given us, and we run and flock to it. We make decisions in our lives. We sow seeds in the world so the world can make us feel better. That's part of the problem. We've turned away from God. Folks, if you don't think the church is turning away from God, when I say the church, I'm talking just overall, just look at its wokeness that is starting. That they've strayed totally from doctrine and they're creating their own things through what the feel-good interpretation of things. And he tells them in 26, he says, that is why God abandoned them to their own shameful desires. Sowing. God's saying, I took my hand back and I left them to their own shameful sowing. On the first part of that. But here's the cool thing about God. Here's the amazing thing about God when you look at Romans 5:8. Romans 5:8 says, but God demonstrates his own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Did you sow any of that? I don't remember reading anybody's name in the Word. Jesus sowed through his love salvation into all of humanity that is willing to accept and believe in him. Jesus did that. The whole plan of God did that. We are reaping from what Jesus has sown. That's amazing. That's an amazing God that we serve. God is the greatest giver of all time. James 1:17, he says, every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of the heavenly lights, who does not change like shifting shadows. In our humanity, we change like shifting shadows because we change at the drop of a hat through emotions. What someone says, what someone did, how someone acted. But God says, I'm an unchanging God. I don't do that to you. I didn't save you today just to turn my back on you tomorrow. You see, I'm not going to turn my back on you. You may decide and choose to turn your back on me, but I will not choose to turn my back on you. And he continually showers us. You see, we're reaping what we didn't sow. We see that in probably the most famous scripture in the Word, John 3:16, right? For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him will not perish but have everlasting life. And then 17 really to me is the anchor. He says, for God did not come to the world, Jesus didn't come to the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. You see, we look so many times through church, through our actions, through different things. We're looking and we're seeing this God that's sitting there just ready to condemn us because we're these wretched people. Guess what? God already knew you were a wretched person in yourself and in your flesh. He didn't have to figure it out. He knows exactly where humanity went. But he says that I love you and I sent Jesus for you. Yeah. You didn't do anything for it. You see, when they were trying to atone for their sins through their sacrifice, through their works, it could only be done for a year. But he's saying, I'm going to do it one time for all. Not because of anything you're doing, but because of what I'm getting ready to do. Big difference. How many, let's bring it down to our level. How many of you been, if you want to say blessed, how many of you have reaped something from a friend, something from a coworker, where you didn't sow anything, but yet you reap the benefit from it? You see, just break it down to where you do life. And we experience those things, and we have those things, and those things happen in our lives. Let me give you another. Let me just throw out two people. Wycliffe and Tyndale. Especially because of those two men, Wycliffe first translating the Bible into English. Then Tyndale translating from the original Greek into the English and got through about half of the Old Testament too. But because of those guys, because see, in their day, which especially with Tyndale, now Wycliffe, he died of a stroke, but Tyndale, he was murdered by the church. Why? Because he translated the Bible into English so that everyone could benefit from it. You see that Bible that you carry around, or that Bible that's at your house right now collecting all kinds of dust? Because of those men, because of those, especially like I say, Tyndale, he was actually, he was burned at the stake, but they actually strangled him before they even did that. The Pope was so angry at Wycliffe after he was dead and everything. This is years later, like 40 years later. He was so angry at him, they dug his body up and then burned it with all of his writings and everything. Hated him so much. This is the Pope. See, there's a lot of history there you don't know about. There's a lot of sacrifice. There's a lot of sowing that went, that they reap horrible things. But we reap the benefit of the Word of God. being in our fingertips. It costs them everything, and it costs you nothing. Did you know that? That's reaping and sowing. Now, it was the same thing that happened. They reaped in a bad way. We reaped in an amazing way because of the same seed that was sown. Those are some of the positive things. Now, there's also negative, right? There's also negative. We reap tough things too in life because of other people's actions, right? Anybody here ever been in a situation where things have went sideways in life, whether it's work, whether it's home, whatever it may be, not because of your actions, but because of someone else's actions, and then turn around, now you're reaping the negativity of their decision. Yep. We've all been there. We've all seen that. We've all experienced that because the law of reaping and sowing, it does not go away. It is every part of your life. And we deal with it in so many different ways. Maybe on an individual level, let's look at it this way. Maybe you grew up in a household where it was just, there's always this critical spirit. You could never do anything right. You were always put down. Nothing ever went the right way. There was always this negativity in your life about who you were. You never thought you could amount to anything because you had individuals and people around you who kept sowing that seed into your life. And you grew up an individual who couldn't accomplish things, who couldn't get themselves out of a wet paper bag, who was unable to be able to accomplish and to be able to move forward in life because they have all this anxiety of what they can't do because that seed was sown in them and they are reaping it now. So I say that to say also parents that have young ones, be careful of the seeds that you sow in your children. They have a lasting effect. It carries on. We've all heard the terms of generational curses. You see different things that perpetuate generation after generation after generation in families. The seed continually gets sown and gets sown and gets sown. And we have to break those cycles, and until the cycle's broken, it doesn't change. It continues to go on because you're reaping the harvest of the habit. And sometimes that habit or that thing that you're reaping is because of someone else's actions. We're living in a time right now, we are starting to, and it is going to get worse, folks. I'm not kidding. We're reaping the bad decisions that the government is making for the people. That is supposed to have freedom surrounded all over it, that I don't know if you've noticed or not, there isn't much of any freedom that's going on right now. You think you have freedom, but you don't. We get away with, I can tell they've changed the algorithms of our Facebook stuff so it doesn't reach the multitudes that we were in the beginning. Yeah. But with anything, now we get away with a lot, I have to say, on YouTube and things of that. But why is that? It's because we don't have this massive following. If all of a sudden we became a place that all of a sudden we had 100, 200,000 followers tuning into our stuff and reading, they would shut a lot of what I say down. Because they wouldn't like it. But that's who I am. I'm a straight shooter. I have more of a Paul mentality. Just in the way I am with my nature. I say it how it is. Because that's what God says. It isn't up to me to change what God is saying just because I want it to say something. Trust me, there's plenty of things in the Bible I don't want it to say what it says. But it does. And He said it for a reason. But as our leaders are sowing a lot of these horrific things, doesn't matter if we're believers or not, we are going to reap from that harvest. Do you realize that? That harvest we are going to pull from. It will happen. Right now we are in a stage of the frog in the water that doesn't know to jump out. This whole nation is full of them. And slowly the heat begins to get turned up. You lose more freedom. Then the water gets a little warmer, but the frog's still okay. He still doesn't jump out. I can deal with this. And by the time the water is boiling, he's paralyzed and he can do nothing about it, and he's cooked right in the pot. That's what's going on. And it's an unfortunate thing, but it doesn't matter. And all through the history of Israel, you realize there's always a remnant. There were always people that were following God. There was always people that were reaching to God, connecting with God, living by the laws, doing what God asked them to do, and being those righteous individuals, those ones that are in right standing with God. They always have existed. But they still reap from the same harvest. We will too. But that's all because this law was set way back. Way back. That same thing, this is the importance of what I talk about, especially with the reaping and sowing. What do you always hear me talking about? It really falls into reaping and sowing is modeling. What we model as Christians is important. What we model as parents is important. What we model as in our business place is important. It doesn't matter if you're a pastor, if you're a deacon, if you're an elder, if you're a Sunday school teacher, if you're a kids' church teacher, if you're a youth teacher, it doesn't matter. But you have to understand and come to a place to realize you are sowing seeds continually. And there will be a harvest from those seeds. All of you, I am planting seeds continually every week when I'm up here. Or even if I'm on Messenger, whatever. I'm planting seeds. I am sowing into your lives. There will be a harvest of that. So those that are in those places where they teach, they do those things, have to take it seriously, because there will be a harvest reaped from that. So it's important what we sow. It's very important what we sow and how we do it. I'm going to have Tyson come up here a second. I did this a long time ago, but most of you weren't here. We weren't online. I've asked him to help me out. Next week, we got our mad scientist, little Eddie Mercer over here, going to be helping me out next week. We're going to do some mad science crazy stuff. You're not so lucky. But I will be nice. I will be nice. Do you like, now this is cinnamon gum. I got to be nice first. Cinnamon gum or a piece of chocolate? Which would you rather have right now?
The gum.
Okay. So, take your piece of gum.
All right.
Look at that. I gave you two. Look at that.
How sweet.
So you can go ahead and eat that. Chew that up. Because, okay, here comes the tough part. I need you to take your shoe off.
If I can get it off, all right.
All right. I need you to put this little rock in that shoe. Now I need you to put your foot back in it.
I probably ain't working out too well.
Well, you don't want me to stomp on it and jam it in there. Just undo it and you got to get your foot in there.
All right.
You're double tied, aren't you? I should ask you that to start with. Say, how hard is it going to be to get your shoe off and on? It's all right. I should have downloaded the Jeopardy music. You can leave it untied as long as you promise don't trip.
All right.
Okay, here's what I need you to do. I want you to walk around the room. I'll just have you walk around the room once, maybe twice.
Okay.
And I just want you to pay attention to it, see how it feels, how it's going, what it's like and you're experiencing with that rock in your shoe. Okay? So well, that don't feel good now. We'll wait till you walk around the room. So you go ahead off, and then I'll get back to you here in just a minute. So the second point, the second law that we're dealing with today is that we reap from the same kind as we sow. And so as Tyson, as he makes his way around, I can see his face. He's kind of not liking it much. I mean, has anybody ever, I get rocks in my boots all the time at work, working on a rock quarry. And it isn't fun. It doesn't feel good. Why do you think I don't have a rock in my shoe right now? I do it all week long. Is one lap good enough for you?
Oh, yeah, I think so.
Okay. Go ahead and take that rock out of there. Woo! All right. Now, just kind of Be descriptive. Just tell us what you experienced, what that was like, having that rock in your shoe walking around this room.
Stepping on a Lego.
Whoo, boy, parents in this place. Whoo. What we should have done made it even better? Turn the lights out. Because that's when you step on a Lego. You know, you're going to the restroom, lights are out, you can't see anything, and all of a sudden you're like, yeah! You know, you're trying not to lose your Christianity on one Lego. But so, discomfort, I mean, what?
Yeah. Not comfortable.
Pain?
A little bit.
Just awkward?
Weird.
Wouldn't want to do that every day?
No.
Okay. All right, you can go have a seat. Thank you. Give them a big clap. Now, here's the illustration. We reap the same kind, we harvest in the same kind of what we sow. Do you realize? I was kind of playing a little bit of the role of Satan right there. Ooh. Don't throw anything at me, Debbie. But here's the thing. I gave him something sweet. I gave him something that tasted good. I'll ask you this, Tice. Did that gum taste good? That gum rocks. I love that gum. It's cinnamon. My next favorite thing to ice cream. And chocolate. I'll stop. He didn't say a word about the blessing of that sweet piece of candy and how it tasted and how his mouth watered. And it was just exploding with just every taste of cinnamon and just how refreshing it was. And he didn't tell me anything about that, but see, I baited him. Because what I did was I gave him something good, just like Satan does. I gave you something that appeared good that tasted good. But then what I did was I refocused him. I said, well, here's what you're going to do. You're going to put this rock in there, and it's not going to feel real good, and you're going to have a lot of pain. And I gave him negativity. I took his mind to a place, bringing him away from a blessing, and took him straight to something negative that was going to be painful in his life, and that's all he focused on. Why? Because I told him to, in a roundabout way. You notice I didn't say, okay, I don't want you to focus on this. All I want you to focus on is that rock. I just started talking about the rock in the shoe and how uncomfortable it was going to be and how bad it was going to be. And what did he do? He followed suit. Yeah. Followed suit. The same way we do. He was reaping. He reaped the harvest and began to sow seeds of negativity. Why? Because I first sowed those seeds in his mind. And so then what did he do? He followed suit. All he gave me was everything negative about the experience. And we do that every day in life, in reaping and sowing, and we do that from the same things. Let me give you a biblical example. I didn't put these scriptures here. Just talk about it a little bit. But David, right after his involvement in Bathsheba, you can actually look at it in 2 Samuel 11. One thing that many of you may not realize, I did touch on this one time, in saying that David, by rights, by the law, should have been dead. But because of God's grace, see, I told you that God's grace is in the Old Testament just the same as it's in the New Testament. We just thought, because we're conditioned to think that the Old Testament was just all about law and doing a certain set of actions, and that's where it came in. No, they did those things because what those things did would show their reliance and their trust and their belief and their anchor in God. But it was His grace that washed away those sins for the year. Otherwise, David would have been killed, would have been taken out by God. Because if you read in 2 Samuel 11, you can go in 15, David committed murder with Uriah. So there he broke one of the 10 Commandments, didn't he? He committed adultery in 11:4. Also in 11:4, you can see where he stole. 11:8 and 21, he bore false witness. 11:2 and 3, he coveted his neighbor's wife. But then what happens? Then what happens is even with all of that, grace still abounded on David. One of the biggest reasons that David was not taken out was because David put no other gods before Yahweh. And David always had a repentant heart. That's why he was a man after God's own heart, is because he was always repentant. And he never put another god before him. What happens is, but God tells him, he says, here's what's going to happen. I'm just speeding through this and paraphrasing. He says, because you've done this and you've done all these things, your family basically is going to live by the sword. And your family is going to reap a harvest from what you just sowed. And you know what happened? His son Absalom, he had a sister named Tamar who was beautiful. And he had another brother from another mother, Amnon. Well, Amnon loved Tamar. He fell in love with Absalom's sister. She was beautiful. He wanted to be with her. He wanted basically to marry her. He just lusted after her, like his father lusted after Bathsheba. Amnon ends up raping Tamar. You can read about it. Absalom is absolutely furious. One thing leads to another. There's a big dinner, there's everything. He convinces David to send Amnon with him. They go off, all this, and his other brothers, they kill him to get revenge. Once again, the sword falls just like God said, because there was a harvest that was reaped because of the habit, because of the sowing of David. They killed the brother. And then God went a step further. He told David, he said, and what you have done in secret, I will do in the open. David ended up having to leave the kingdom. He had to leave the kingdom because Absalom's coming. He has turned the people's minds towards him so that they would make him king. David knows he's coming basically to kill him. He comes and anyway, Absalom talks to one of his advisors, and they're like, man, how can we solidify this thing with the people? And they really put their everything behind him. You know what the answer was? Take all David's concubines, his wives that he left behind, take them up to the rooftop and sleep with all of them in front of all of Israel. And they'll know that you have turned your back so heavily and so hard on your father that they will come towards you and they'll worship and they will view you and it'll solidify you being their leader. Everything had a harvest. David sowed a seed that reaped a harvest of total chaos in the rest of his life through his children and everything else. Because you do not and you cannot escape the law of sowing and reaping. It is always there. It will never end. It has been established since creation. Let me show you. In Genesis 11 or in Genesis 1, 11 and 12, it says this three times here. He talks about things being according to its kind. Then God said, let the earth bring forth grass, the herb that yields seed, and the fruit tree that yields fruit according to its kind, whose seed is in itself on earth, and it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, the herb that yields seed according to its kind, and the tree that yields fruit, whose seed is according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. All the way in the beginning in Genesis, God was establishing the sowing and the reaping, and that they were of the same kind. How many of you know you do not plant a corn seed and grow an apple tree? Yeah. Doesn't work, right? Because God created that seed within the grass, that seed within the tree. He created it to produce of its own kind. So what is sown and what was sown in that is reaped through another tree, right? Through the harvest. He established it all the way in the beginning. So everything, even biologically, was set forth by God in how it was going to manifest. The law of sowing and reaping, God even did himself. Jesus even said in John 3:6, he said, that which is born of the flesh is flesh, and that which is born of the Spirit is spirit. You don't get good out of evil, right? Only thing that flesh is capable of producing is more flesh. You ever seen that in life with people you know, or even in your own life, maybe in your past or anything? The only thing that you sowed was out of your flesh, and the only thing you reaped was whatever that produced. Not necessarily anything that had to do with God. You can't sow something wrong and produce something that's right. Amen? Paul stresses that in that 7 and 8 if you wanted to go back there and read that. I'm not going to. But listen to me. You don't sow discord and reap unity. All you reap is more discord. You don't sow hypocrisy and reap holiness. Doesn't happen. All you reap from flesh is flesh. In Job 4:8, Eliphaz, one of his friends, Job's friends, he tells him this from his observations. He says that they that plow in iniquity and sow wickedness reap the same. Negative produces negative. Wickedness produces more wickedness. We've seen that time and time again. We don't get away from it. We don't dodge that area. David sowed to the flesh. He reaped from the flesh. He reaped the consequences of that. Here's something I want you to put a big star by. Get this in your head. Because we live in a how can I say it? In a grace society, because grace definitely is grace. Don't get me wrong. But we also live in a hyper grace where you live however you want, do whatever you want. Like I've said, Jesus solved the issue of your destination through grace, and that is with heaven, with God. The Holy Spirit is what came and then changed our lives. Because all through the Word, all through the New Testament, there still shows, because God just said, I will not be mocked in my justice. Yeah. He's saying there's consequences. You're going to reap what you sow. And here's what I want you to get. Confession and forgiveness does not, will never stop the cycle of the harvest. Do you get that? I'm going to say it again. Confession and forgiveness will never stop the cycle of the harvest. There will still be a harvest consequence of what was sown. You can't get around it. It is one of the laws that God put down from the beginning. It is solid, it's solidified, it is there. What's sown, we're going to reap something from that. God said He wouldn't be mocked, and He proves it. Two other things of negative, reaping and sowing, to try to give you quickly here. Haman and Mordecai. It's in the book of Esther. I'm not going to put that up there. Quick version again. Mordecai is a Jew. He's of the Jewish nation. He has ticked off Haman. He's made him mad because he sits outside the palace gates and he won't recognize Haman. He won't bow to him. So Haman gets ticked. He devises a plan. He's not only going to kill Mordecai, he's going to end up, they're going to try to kill the whole and wipe out the whole Jewish nation. So what he does is he takes and creates a 75-foot pole to impale Mordecai. He's going to kill Mordecai and impale him for everyone to see. And then some things happen. I don't want to explain it all, but basically Esther ends up thwarting the plan, gets to the king, and things get turned around. So he's sowing this seed, right? Guess what happens? Everything backfires, and Haman gets put on that 75-foot pole and impaled himself by the king's men. Because he sowed that seed, but he harvested through his wickedness. I'll give you another example that you may not even think of. About how this sowing and reaping, harvesting from our habits. Jacob was a liar. Jacob lied to his dad, Isaac, to get the blessing of the firstborn, which is Esau. So he lies to his father and goes through this whole elaborate scheme. And he lies to him, and he deceives in Esau, and he takes the birthright and all this. But here's the part of the story I bet you never picked up on about the law of sowing and reaping. Then Jacob falls in love with Rachel. He goes and works for 7 years for Laban so that he can have the right to his daughter and the hand to his daughter. He does that, he completes that, and it's different than how our marriages and how everything happens. And anyway, then Laban, he pulls a switcheroo. And he actually gives Jacob his daughter, Leah. She goes in, they consummate the marriage and all this. And it isn't until the next morning Jacob realizes, you're not Rachel. What are you doing? Laban, you lied to me. What? And then Laban says, well, it wouldn't be right for me to give you Rachel, who's basically the second-born. See, I have to follow the tradition of the firstborn. So what happened to Jacob, he sowed that same lying spirit. He sowed that same thing because he stole the firstborn's right over here. And then Laban pulled the same trick on him that he sowed over here. Now Laban just did it to him. He reaped from the harvest that he sowed. I bet most of us never caught that. But he reaped from that same pot. We don't get around it. We can't get around it. Give me my last thing here. This one here will go pretty quick. Many times that we find ourselves sowing our seed and different seeds through different situations all week long. And then we come to church, man, just hoping and praying that the harvest of the crop that we've sown all week long doesn't happen. Because we've sown some things that we shouldn't have been sowing. So the third thing is we reap many times in a different season than we sowed it. Many times the harvest doesn't come immediately at the planting. You plant some corn, does it grow up? Do you walk outside the next day? I mean, this isn't Jack and the Beanstalk. You don't plant corn today and tomorrow you got to stop producing corn. It doesn't happen. The planting, the sowing and the harvest are at two different times, most times. Genesis 8:22 kind of puts this out. He says, as long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night, will never cease. He's showing that there is a separation, there's a difference between those two times. Ecclesiastes 11:1, Solomon's talking about it here, he's talking about some financial things, but he's saying, ship your grain across the sea. After many days, you will receive a return. How many times have you, or maybe someone in your life, or someone around you in your circle of influence, sowed a seed that you knew wasn't right, but that may not come to fruition until 2, 3, 4 years down the road? Maybe weeks, maybe months, maybe hours. But there's a separation. Usually, those things sown don't end up in the harvest until a later time. And he's given that picture of that same thing. And the negative is also true. It always works on both sides. Whether it's a positive or whether it's a negative, sowing and reaping both happen. Whether it's negative or positive. Ecclesiastes 8:11, I'm going to give you this. When I come across this scripture, I was like, wow, I don't remember reading that. Although, I've read the whole Bible, but it's like, I don't remember that, but it's so powerful because it's so true. When a crime is not punished quickly, people feel it's safe to do wrong. I'm sure we could get a lot of insight from Debbie on that one. What is it saying? Because God doesn't sometimes judge instantly, we think that we're getting away with sinning. We think that we're getting away with something. And so we think that that just gives us a license under grace to just keep on going and doing whatever it is we want to do. And he just told us, he said, no, that isn't the case. I know that's how you feel and that's what you think, but that isn't the case because he already told us that his justice won't be mocked. We don't get that option. I'm going to finish this week with these few scriptures here, these 5 scriptures, because these are powerful. This is part of that Romans 1 I told you to read. Since they thought it foolish to acknowledge God, he abandoned them to their foolish thinking and let them do things that should never be done. There's the sowing. Their lives became, here comes the reaping, their lives became full of every kind of wickedness, sin, greed, hate, envy, murder, quarreling. Boy, it's starting to sound like today. Doesn't it kind of sound like the world? Murder, quarreling, deception, malicious behavior, and gossip. They're backstabbers, haters of God, insolent, proud, boastful. They even invent new ways of sinning. And they disobey their parents. They refuse to understand, break their promises, they're heartless, and have no mercy. They know God's justice requires that those who do these things deserve to die. Yet they do them anyway. Worse yet, they encourage others to do the same. Is that not a picture of our society? Is not the world encouraging every form of wickedness? And for each of us, I don't care. Evil does not look at, are they a Christian or are they not a Christian? I better not bother them. Evil doesn't care. Wickedness does not care. It is trying to engulf you, and we see it in society today to pull you in. But we have to stay strong, we have to stay confident, and we have to believe. We have to change. It tells us that it takes 21 days to create a new habit. To turn from old ones. We need to turn from some of those old habits and get on a track because there is always a harvest from what we sow. See, so what you're sowing is going to be in direct portion to what you reap. But we have to be confident. We have to believe that God can do the impossible. Some of you may say, yeah, but I've been doing this for years and I don't know, I just always fall prey to it. I don't know, I've asked God and it's just believe. Get in the Word, create a different habit, change a habit, stay true to it. I'm going to do a second one, illustration. How many of you think I can pass all of this gloriousness through the center of this paper? No takers? Okay. Let's do a Gideon here. Remember Gideon? I think it was the Amorites, but he was going to go into battle. He had 32,000 men up against 135,000. And God said, well, Gideon, I want you to go down there and you know what? We're going to get rid of 22,000 of your men. I'm going to leave you with 10,000 because I don't want you guys to boast about what you could do. So we're going to have kind of a little bit of Gideon moment. And actually, then he turns around and he takes it away all the way down to 300 because God wanted to show off. So, I'm going to show you something. So I'm going to, just like Gideon, now you're going to be able to see me shake. Just like Gideon, I'm going to whittle this down. Whoop. Come on. I have my longer scissors at home. So he whittles it down. He says, all right, now what I was going to have you do at 32,000 against 135,000, that was big enough feat in itself, but I want you to whittle it down, so now we're going to whittle you down because I want you to believe in me. I want you to know that I'm the God of all gods. And I don't want you guys to boast and turn around and go back to your own ways. I want you to see that I can do exactly what I say I can do, that I can turn this thing around. So he's down to 10,000 men. He's like, now I want you to go down to the brook. And so anyway, they do some stuff and lapping up like a dog, unless you can read the story. But anyway, so he takes it down. He says, now some of these guys are going to walk away from you. 9,700 walked away. So Gideon had 300 men to go up against 135,000. So maybe we should cut this down again. Give me a minute. Shake your hand. Now, how many of you think I can pass through the center of this piece of paper? Not many of you, right? All right. Here we go. So let's fold it in half. Bear with me. Take me just a second here. Yeah. Where's everybody eating after church? You always know I'm going to go to food. All right. Now after this, don't make fun of all my shaking. My kids will. They like to do that to Dad. But they know that Dad will still be there even with all the laughing at me. See, we serve an amazing God who, even when we think there's no possible way that something could happen positive or that things could go in the right direction, even when all surmountable odds are against us, even when everything that we come up against says, Darren, you're fooling yourself, big boy. Have you looked in the mirror lately? Man, those are real wide. Thanks, Tiff. I went through this last night. Big scissors. Didn't work real well. But I also have to believe that God can do anything. Oh, sure, He may take natural steps and use what He's creation, something in it, to change a way, to do something different, to show us something. Because many of you think everything's impossible. Because we lose faith, we lose trust, because so many times all we see is everything from a worldly standpoint. And we forget about the nature and the Spirit of God who loves to show off. One more step here. Whoop. Bear with me. Whoop. Don't want to hit that one. See, I'm one of those guys that I'm a big believer. Boy, now my eyes are getting me too. I'm going to walk away cross-eyed after this one. I'm a big believer in God. I'm a big believer in when He's unchanging, that if He can part the Red Sea, He can show a way that I can pass through the center of a little bitty piece of paper. Even a guy my size. We're almost there. I'll just stop there. Now, how many of you think, Sherry, you're probably going to have to come down here. You should know this from last night because my shirt drags. Now, be very easy because you'll break it. It's fragile. You see, you thought there wasn't a way. But with God, there's always a way. I know you struggle, just like I struggle, with our habits in life, with the things we sow. But I know that I serve a big, big God. That even when I don't think I can get over the hump, whether it's through nature, whether it's through something you've read, whether it's through something you've studied in the Word, God will illuminate and show you that there is a way. There's a way to change those habits so that the harvest in your life becomes more fruitful and becomes something that is in an image of God. Something that brings a positive light in your life and changes your life and the lives that you affect around you. None of you believe that this big old guy was going to fit through the center of that paper, and I showed you it's possible. You just have to believe and be willing to change course and move in a direction towards God. And you'll be amazed at the things that He'll unlock and He'll show you that are possible with Him. That are possible with someone else coming up alongside you in life and saying, let me hold you, let me love you, let me be there for you, let me just do this, let me just do that. Because I want your harvest to change. Because I've showed you in Scripture, reaping and sowing. The harvest of your habit is going to happen. There are no two ways around it. And God won't be mocked. Next week, we'll unlock 3 more laws that deal with this. Hopefully I've given you a little bit to chew on, a little bit to see with the rock and with this. That things are possible to change. And that when you're walking around in life, don't just be focused on the negative, but see and look for the blessing that God has given you to take your mind off. Don't listen to the world. Don't listen to the devil. Don't listen to your friends that are spewing negativity in your ear to keep you focused on the negative harvest of your life. One of the things I'm going to talk about next week that applies to that harvest is that you cannot change the harvest of your past, but you can control and change the harvest of your future. That'll be next week.